Chris Smith. He just stepped out of Ocean's 11. Family man, one of the most brilliant branding, storytelling, alignment strategists I have ever met. Truly. Look at this, they're even playing music.
That's my heartbeat.
Oh, I could feel it. Yeah. Holy cow. Chris Smith, truly I have learned so much from this man, and I cannot wait to hear what he's going to teach us. Chris, let's hear it one more time for Chris Smith.
Thank you. Thanks, Spence. You know, I first have to start by saying how amazing I think it is, this event. I mean, of all the events I have the opportunity to speak at, by far, the most inspiring, most moving, most exciting, energy, filled event that I've spoken at was last year at L2E. And so I'm just so grateful to be back this year, but I really do want to say, I hope you guys really appreciate what the LDS Business College is providing for you guys. I mean, this is an unbelievable opportunity for you to come and learn and grow and connect with each other. And I don't mean, I know it's been a contribution by everyone, but I really think that Spencer Taggart himself has gone above and beyond. He was here till 1 in the morning last night. Let's give a hand for Spencer and everything that he does to put on this event. It's unbelievable. So I can't tell you how excited I was to be able to hear David Sturt speak. So David and I actually have a good mutual friend, Mark Christensen, who I work with a lot down in Arizona. I've read David's book. I have a signed copy of David's book, and I've never met him. So to hear him talk about great work, so many of the things that I believe in, and aligns with so much of what I believe in and that I love to teach. And so I actually want to ask you guys, there was a quote that David had that was unbelievable that I tweeted about our spiritual DNA. Who's the first person that can tell me word for word that quote? Anyone write that quote down? What was it? Sure. Because I'm going to give you something. I don't even have permission to give you something. But I gave something away last year. You want a Blendtec?
Dude, he tried to pull this last year, too.
What a hat.
Somebody guard this guy, because he likes to just give stuff away.
Starts throwing stuff. What is it?
Goodness.
Every one of you has a spiritual DNA of a creator. If there's nothing else you guys learned today but that, and you go home and think about what that really means, the spiritual DNA of a creator, unbelievable. So here's a hat for you. Whoa! So K-Cross is a brand alignment consultancy, and I want to talk a little bit later about K-Cross and kind of what it means to me, but I would love to connect with you guys. I mean, last year I shared my email address with you and my Twitter handle, and it was amazing because after the conference I was able to connect with a lot of you and hear your stories and learn from you. And I got to be honest, your stories inspired me. When I went home and my wife started looking through my Twitter handle and she started looking at the emails I received, she said, "What are you going to do with this?" And I said, what do you mean? She said, "These inspiring stories and these people that are reaching out to you and these just amazing individuals." And I have to tell you, you guys really, this event last year really did change my life. It took me down a different course of where I was going with K-Cross and what I was doing, and so I'm incredibly grateful and I feel totally blessed to be here and share with you today. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm a 5th generation native of Arizona. I grew up in a ranching rodeo family. I still compete in team roping events all over the Southwest, and that's just what I love to do. This is my good horse, Cash. If it came down between my family and Cash, I would have a hard time deciding. Ivy would stay for sure, and Cash, but this is what I love to do. So this is my family. This is why I get up and do what I do every day. This is my inspiration. So this is Ivy, and that's Teddy. He had to bear the princess party. He had pink streamers in his mane and in his tail. And baby number 4 is on the way in April. Thank you. So this is my inspiration. This is part of my vision of why I do what I do. But this man right here had a profound impact on my life. This is my great-grandfather, Jack Gable. And I have a hard time talking about him without getting emotional, no matter how many times I talk about him, because of the profound impact he had on my life. And this is one of his bolo ties that he gave me before he passed away. And so every time I speak, I wear one of his bolo ties because I want to remember where I came from. And I want to remember my roots, and I want to remember how my story was developed, generations ago, and the legacy that I carry on. So the K-Cross brand is an actual cattle brand that my great-grandfather registered with the state of Arizona in 1950. And so when I decided to go out and start my own consultancy, I thought, what greater brand and legacy do I want to carry on than that of the K-Cross brand. And I believe today that if we thought about our personal brands and our personal stories more along the lines of how my great-grandfather thought about his brand, I think it changed the way we live. I think it changed the way how we treat each other. I think it changed the way we do business. Because you see, the K-Cross brand of my great-grandfather, Jack Gable, it wasn't just about his product or his service, which was ranching and cattle. That brand represented everything about what he stood for as a man in the community, as a man in business, and as a family man. That brand was what he stood for. And so oftentimes I'll think about my great-grandfather sitting around the campfire with his ranch hands. And when I thought about, a few years ago when I went out and started my own consultancy and how I got into what I do now is I was working for a financial services company. And to what David talked about, they were doing good work, but they were really missing just a few key things to allow them to do great work. So in the process of helping them, that's where I really caught on fire for the first time in my life. I went to work at this financial services company thinking I was going to be a financial advisor, and that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Have anyone else in here had a hard time deciding what you're going to do in life? Sometimes you change multiple times in a day, right? What your major is going to be and what you're going to do for a career. I used to drive my wife crazy when we were first married. I'd have multiple career changes in the day. Not in the year, not in the weeks, not in the months, in the day, right? So it was really hard for me to understand what I wanted to do. So that's what I was thinking when I was going to go into financial services. I'd be this financial advisor. Well, then I had this opportunity when they merged two different companies together. I had this opportunity to look at these two companies and say, how would we integrate their cultures and how would we integrate their brands and their stories? And better yet, how do we create the type of culture and the customer experience and the brand and the story that we want? And so I just went to work and I asked my friend, I said, do you mind if I take a shot at helping with the culture and the purpose and the brand of this organization? He said, no, by all means. And for the first time in my life, I started doing things that I feel like I was put on this earth to do. I caught fire. And what was interesting is I looked back on my life. I had done a lot of things because I was chasing other people's definition of success. I was chasing opportunities based on how the world defines success, but I had never taken the time to create my own definition of success. But when I caught fire and realized this is what I'm supposed to do, I felt compelled to then go out and share that with the world because we were able to do some amazing things with that company to where they are now doing great work and had a lot of growth. And so when I looked back at my experience with that financial services company and what I did, I said, and I thought about my great-grandfather sitting around the campfire with his ranch hands. Now, how many of you have ever sat around a campfire before? Let me ask this. Has anyone not sat around a campfire before? Wow, a couple people. We're going to do a campfire tonight for those of you who haven't sat around a campfire. So when I think about sitting around the campfire, and when I go into organizations and talk, and I've been able to do this with Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, single entrepreneurs, and I ask them what are the thoughts and feelings that they have when they think about sitting around a campfire. A lot of the responses I get is freedom, connection, trust, vulnerability. You're present when you're sitting around a campfire. There's something magical about that campfire and the flame that draws you in and just makes you feel comfortable. I mean, I was big in Boy Scouts, and I tell people that when I was in Boy Scouts, there were, on occasion, some kids in my Boy Scout troop that I didn't particularly like, and we'd get around a campfire, and I liked them. And when the campfire was over, I didn't like them again. There's something really amazing and magical about a campfire. And so I started thinking about that, and I thought, what if we could recreate the campfire effect inside organizations and inside people's lives? To where they showed up every day at a place to work where they wanted to trust, reflect, and connect. And so that's ultimately what I decided to do is I created the campfire effect, and I said, I want to go out and share with the world the campfire effect. I want to teach people how they can trust, reflect, and connect with themselves and with the places they work. And what I mean by trust is you have to trust that it's okay to be your best authentic self. You have to trust that when you show up to work in an organization, that you're safe to say the things that you feel free to say. Reflect. I want you guys to reflect on what you want most in life. And then ultimately connect. I want you, as you trust and reflect, I want you to connect with what your natural talents and gifts are. And I hope that you go to work for an organization where you can ultimately, your purpose in life connects with the purpose of that organization. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about how we can help create the campfire effect in our lives and in the places we work. And I want to give you guys a little pep talk. But there's a person much better than me at giving pep talks, so I'll go ahead and let them do that.
I think we all need a pep talk. The world needs you to stop being boring. Yeah, you. Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, aren't we on the same team? I mean, really, right? I'm on your team, be on my team. This is life, people. You got air coming through your nose. You got heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. A poem. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man! Really bad. Rocks, thorns, and glass. My pants broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. But what if there really were two paths? I want to be the one that leads to awesome. It's like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing unless your dream's stupid. Then you should get a better dream. I think that's how it goes. Get a better dream and keep going. Keep going, keep going, and keep going. Will Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. So he retired. Yeah, yes, he retired. But before that, in high school, what if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. And I love Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create will make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it, or we can dance about it. We were made to be awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know everything. I'm just a kid. But I do know this. As everybody's doing to give the world a reason to dance. So get to it. You've just been pep talked. Create something that will make the world awesome.
So like this young man in the video, Kid President, I really felt like most of my life, and as I've talked with a lot of you from last year, I find that you were in a very similar situation. That is, I just really never had the courage to do what I knew I was always meant to do. Deep down, I knew that I was meant to do something else and I was meant to do something different, but I just never had the courage to be the person who I knew I was. And it wasn't until I was set free, and in that freeing process, I gained clarity on what I wanted to be. And so my goal today here to talk with you and help talk about the Campfire Effect is I hope to set you guys free to be your best authentic selves. You know, one of my favorite books, it's called Tao Te Ching. And in that book, there's a quote in there that says, when we are free to simply be ourselves and not worry or compete with others or compare ourselves to others, then everyone respects us because we respect ourselves. And it says, if you care about what other people think of you, you become their prisoner. So one of my favorite quotes is by Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Now, I can't do anything about the first part. That was already done, right? You're all here. You were born. But I do think I can help you figure out why. You know, as I've studied the campfire, I really understood that there's two incredible things that happen with the campfire. There's two distinct elements. One is the campfire brings people together. It draws them in, even if they're complete strangers. And then once they're there, there's something magical about the campfire that keeps them there. So I started looking at and I started studying, what is it that draws people into the campfire, and then what is it that keeps them there? And I believe it's the clarity, the warmth, and the glow of the campfire that brings them in. But then once the people are there, I believe it's their stories that connect them and keep them there. The stories are what keep them around the campfire. And so I'm going to challenge you guys today to get small so that you can go out and serve big. And what do I mean by get small? So I want you to picture a really high compression spring And that getting small process is where we take that really high compression spring and we slowly and painfully push that high compression spring down and then lock it in place and keep it there for a while. Now, if you're picturing yourself as that spring, could that be a painful process? Very much so. And I want to be the first to tell you that if you're going to go through the sacrifice and the investment of figuring out why you were put on this earth, it might be a little bit painful at times. It might be challenging. But in doing so, there's a huge reward, because if you get small enough and get clarity around why you were put on this earth and who you are, that allows you to go out and then when we take those, take the guards off or take the bindings off that spring and you explode and you go out and serve big. But most people, especially organizations, never take the time to get small. It's so much easier to just go out and do things and do tactics because it makes us feel good that we're accomplishing things. The hardest thing to do is to get a company to sit down and really come together as a leadership team and say, what do we want to be known for and what do we want to stand for and who are we? But it's like Chad said, the minute they did that with CHG, got small and really got clarity and decided who they wanted to be, they were able to go out and serve big. David gave plenty of examples of people that I really think that in order for us to do great work, we've got to get small. But part of that getting small isn't just thinking about it ourselves. We were all put on this earth to serve each other. I really believe that there's very few things in this life of value that we can do alone. We're saved in the saving process, right? We only are saved ourselves if we go out and help save others. So in this process of getting small, I think it's really important that we go out and ask other people, what do you think of me? What do you think my brand is, right? And go out and collaborate with others. But I want to talk about something that I think is a misconception about brand. If you Google the definition of what is a brand, you can come up with 13 or 14 different definitions. Let me smile here for the camera. And I think that sometimes we cheapen the phrase brand because we think of it as branding. We think of it as a logo or an image. But I think if we understand what brand truly means, I think it has the power to transform our lives and transform organizations. Because to me, a brand is so much more than your logo. It's so much more than an image. As we've gone out and as I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, small companies, entrepreneurs, and talked with other thought leaders, I've asked them, what do you think the number one challenge in business is? And everyone has their own different opinion. But what I've done is I've taken and looked at all those different challenges that people say that they face in life, personally, and in business, and I've said, is there a common denominator above all of these challenges? And I personally believe that it's a lack of brand clarity. I see it all the time in organizations when they don't understand what their brand is and what they stand for and who they are. It makes it really difficult for them to do great work and do sustainable things because they haven't taken the time to get that clarity. That clarity promotes accountability. That clarity promotes action. And that clarity promotes a peace, and confidence. So I want to show you a funny video about what happens when there isn't clarity in our lives or within especially organizations.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
So that happens way too many times in our lives and in our organizations where we're trying to communicate something, but there's a lack of clarity, and we think people should understand what we're trying to say, but they don't. One of the things that I'm amazed at when I go inside organizations especially is they want to hold their people accountable to something that really doesn't exist. They have these accountability issues. They have these communication issues. And then I start talking to them and I say, well, tell me about what your brand stands for. Talk to me about the purpose of your brand and the clarity of who you are and who you're going to serve. And none of the leaders are on the same page. None of them can answer that question. And I said, well, you do realize you're trying to hold them accountable to something that doesn't exist. You're trying to hold them accountable to something that isn't clear. But we have a responsibility to hold ourselves accountable, right? So the minute we as individuals in our personal brands start thinking about and getting small and saying, what do I want to be known for? What do I want to stand for? you can create that clarity around that and then hold yourself accountable to that. You can look at things in your life and say, is this activity aligning with what I said I wanted to be known for? Your brand is the single most important investment you can make in your business, and I will also say your brand is the single most important investment you can make in your life if a brand represents more than just a logo or an image. If your brand is your stand, which that's what I look at brand as. Your brand is what you stand for. It's what you're known for. Like when I think of my great-grandpa Jack Gable, I know what that man stood for. I know what he was known for. That's his brand. And I want to show you an example of a company who I think in the history of marketing and advertising and branding has done one of the best jobs ever at really understanding brand at this deeper level.
I've always been a writer, ever since I can remember, including third grade, but I had no idea that I was going to be in advertising. I can tell you I didn't even know what advertising was. It's very simple, but if you look at it, it is an argument. It is a syllogism. We're number 2, but we try harder. We're putting our name on the line. We can't afford to give you a dirty car. We can't afford to give you windshield wipers that don't wipe. We can't afford to give you dirty ashtrays. We presented a company that was willing to work for you. It was sort of like tacking up the manifesto on the door. And the one thing I'm sure we did is kind of write a manual for the whole rent-a-car business. I think we hit a chord. People talked about it a lot. They were intrigued by it. So when people started to say, hey, we saw your ad, it's terrific, everybody kind of perked up. They began to be very proud, and the whole organization changed. The cars got better care, the customers got better care. They began to get a lot more customers. Their advertising has included the We Try Harder for years.
So Avis, We Try Harder. And I don't know if you guys caught some of the things she said in there about what those 3 simple words, that clarity of We Try Harder, what it did to their organization. It said as they gained clarity around this idea of we try harder, they looked at everything in their organization and all the departments and everyone in their organization, and if you study this campaign more, you'll realize that everything had to align to that. So they would look at marketing and say, how does marketing try harder? What does that mean to us? How does sales try harder? How does customer service try harder? Everyone on the leadership team had to decide for themselves, how do I try harder as it relates to that? And it said because of those 3 simple words and that clarity around that, the whole organization began to change. They began to get a lot more customers. The other thing that you don't see in this video, anyone know who was number 1 at the time in the rental car business? Hertz. There's a valuable personal lesson we can learn from what Avis did do and what they didn't do. Hertz was number 1. Avis is not just number 2. Avis is with everyone else. So it's Avis and everyone else in the rental car industry and Hertz, and Avis said, how do we separate ourselves from the pack? Now, what would most people do if Hertz was number 1 and they were trying to grow? What would most companies want to go do? Go after Hertz. Go head-to-head with them and knock them off, right? Avis was so smart, and this is where I think we can learn a lot, because Avis said, you know what? We don't need to try and compete with someone we're not. We don't need to compare ourselves to Hertz. Let's let Hertz have that position. That's fine. Let's gladly embrace the fact that we're number 2. And not only that, we'll embrace it in our their advertising was ingenious, right? We have to try harder because we're number 2. We don't have a choice. If we don't try harder, we're not going to make it because we're number 2. You guys, you don't have to compare yourselves to anyone. You don't have to try and be like anyone else. You need to decide for yourself and gain that brand clarity of what do you stand for? What are you going to be known for? And be comfortable with that. Be confident and okay with that. So I want to really challenge you guys as you go home from this conference tonight, think about how you're going to do great work. But come up with a 3 to 5 to 7 word brand clarity statement for you that you can look at everything in your life and you can align it back to and say, am I living that? My statement is to set people and organizations free. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do it through the campfire effect. But I can look at things in my life and I can look at to where I'm spending my time and I can say, are these activities aligning with what I said I'm going to be known for? And hold myself accountable to that. Another one of my favorite quotes, and I've heard this several different areas, so I don't know who to exactly attribute the quote to. I first heard it in the Story of Purpose. but is your growth is found in your roots. If you are struggling to understand your identity and who you are and what you want to be known for, what I find so interesting about that is most of the time our solution to that is to look outside and look ahead and look down the road of opportunities. That's actually an area, we're always talk, don't ever dwell on the past, don't ever look in the past. This is an area and this is a time where you should be looking at the past and see where you come from. Because somewhere in your roots of where you come from, whether that's a happy story or a story of struggle or challenge, in your roots is your future growth. And if you will think about your roots and where you come from and what you've gone through, by looking backwards to focus on your roots, the path forward will be made clear to you. I promise you that. When I'm struggling with creativity or struggling with ideas or I'm just discouraged in business, or when I need to get creative solutions or ideas for a client, do you know where my go-to book is? It's a little family history book that my great-grandma Ethel Gable wrote. I can go read about my family history and read about my roots and get inspiration. So once you have that clarity and once you have your brand, you owe it to the world to go out and share with them your story. The world needs to hear your story. Every one of you is a gift that's been given to this earth, and the greatest gift I believe that most of us have is our pure, authentic story as individuals, and we need to share that story with people. You guys, the world is changing. The way employers hire people, the way companies choose who they're going to work with and hire salespeople or consultants, the old style of talking about features and benefits and resumes and skills, people care about that, but what they want to know first is, who are you? They want to hear your authentic story. When you walk in to talk with someone or you go into an interview, the more clear you are on your brand, and you can walk in there and share with them your authentic story as a person, that's going to resonate and that's going to connect with them.
Is this thing even on?
Yeah, that means it's recording.
We all love stories. We're born for them. They can't be artificially evoked. It doesn't always mean plot or fact.
Take 48,327.
They aren't an actual exact science. That's what's so special about stories. They're not predictable. It's capturing a truth from your experience. It can cross the barriers of time, real and imagined, expressing values you personally feel deep down to your core.
My favorite line in that video is it says that stories cannot be artificially evoked. When we tell stories, we speak truth. And what does the truth do to people as we read in the scriptures? The truth does what to people? Sets them free. If you want to set yourself free, work on your story. And if you want to set other people free, which I believe we have a responsibility to do to our fellow brothers and sisters, go out and tell your story. Your story will help free others so that they feel free to seek out their gifts and talents and understand who they are and why they were put on this earth. So I want to ask you guys, why storytelling? I've been studying this idea of storytelling for probably the last 10 years, and I'd be willing to bet that in the last 18 months to 2 years, I've seen more content, more articles, more emphasis placed on the subject of storytelling in the last 18 months to 2 years than in the previous 8 combined. So anytime I see a massive swell like that, something happening, a trend, I stop and say, what could possibly be going on in the world right now that's driving this? Any ideas? Throw out some. Why do you guys think we're seeing such an emphasis on storytelling? People are tired of not finding authenticity. People remember the stories. We're hardwired for stories. We don't remember stats, features, and benefits. Technology has far outpaced our ability to keep up with it, but what we can keep up with is stories. It's the universal language. Stories are told in every language since the beginning of time. So people remember stories. Authenticity. What else? Why storytelling? Stories are real. Stories impact and change lives. We're all seeking to understand a global story of who we are. Connections. You guys, if you will tap into and leverage the power of storytelling, you will be amazingly successful in whatever you decide to do as long as it's authentic. The world today is starved for authenticity and genuineness. Absolutely starved for it. Employers are starved to hire people that are authentic. Companies starve for authenticity inside their cultures and their organizations. A lot of the Bureau of Labor statistics show that there's going to be a massive talent shortage over the next impending decades. There's going to be more demand for jobs than talent available. And when I come to L2E and I meet you guys, I have a hard time believing that. Right? But it's our responsibility to say, what am I going to do to seek out and understand how to tell my story and build my brand? So I want to give you one real quick case study, because a lot of times people say, I don't know how important storytelling is. I don't know if it really makes an impact. In the summer of 2006, New York Times columnist Rob Walker was sitting at his desk, and he was mulling over this idea of what makes one object more valuable than the other. Why does a pair of shoes sell for $40 and another pair of shoes sells for $400? Or why does a toaster sell for $20 and another toaster sells for $400 and they both make toast, right? Well, the conclusion he came to was that it isn't the objects themselves that determine their value, but rather their provenance, their origin, their context. But it was just a theory. So to prove his theory, he went and bought a plastic banana, a ceramic cracked horse's head, and a miniature jar of mayonnaise. He then hired professional writers to write stories that simply contained the items in the story. So to make it less obvious, the stories weren't even about the item. The item was just simply put in context inside of the story. He then took the stories, coupled it with the item, put them on eBay. Average return on investment, 2,700%. Did anything change about these items? No, they just simply had a story in which people could connect with, and they were authentic now, they were real, and people could put them in context. If stories have the ability to raise prices and value on something as silly as a plastic banana, then imagine what they can do for us in our personal lives. So I want you guys to think about this in closing. When you tell someone your story, does your story cause them to think differently? Chad, on average, how many people do you guys have apply for a position? 18,000 to 20,000 a year. If I walk into, talking a little old school, you don't walk into anywhere anymore. If I submit something online to Chad, and my story doesn't cause them to think differently, the likelihood of them spending another second on my application, my resume, next. But if I can actually cause them to think differently and remember me or something about me, or if my story teaches them something new. So does your story cause people to think differently, or does your story teach them something new? What I strive for when I'm meeting with prospective clients is when I say something to them or I talk to them, and they say, I'd never thought of that before. That's really interesting. I know I've made an impact with my story. But I've had to learn the hard way. You guys want to know the number one secret to being an amazing storyteller? Is you have to be an unbelievable listener. And I had to learn that the hard way. I love to talk, if you can't tell. But when David was talking about the quote from Albert Einstein, if you will listen, not to just know what to say next, but listen so that person feels understood, I promise you this, because you have spent the time to get small and know your brand and your story, if you will spend the time to listen to people, you will know exactly what you're supposed to say to them, and you will have clarity in what you say around your brand and your story. The greatest form of creativity is authenticity. Of all the billions of people that have been put on this planet, no one will ever be like me. No one will ever be like you. You, in your natural state, just being you, is the most creative thing that's ever been invented in this world. But so many times, we try to be so creative and so out of the box that in the process of being creative, we lose our authenticity because we start being like everyone else. So in closing, I want to give you a formula, one story formula. We have lots of them. This was developed by a New York cartoonist, Roz Chast. And she said, if you will follow this format every time you tell a story, whether you're interviewing for a job, you're going in to pitch a client, you're sharing customer success stories in your marketing, once upon a time, suddenly, luckily, happily ever after. And it sounds silly, but let me show you how the formula actually works. Once upon a time, there was a kid named Chris Smith that grew up in a small farming town in Pima, Arizona, and grew up in a ranching rodeo family. And he had born in him this desire to be an entrepreneur from the generations of his family. So he thought that the way to be successful was to make a lot of money. So he went into the real estate career where a lot of other people were making lots of money. And suddenly found himself really unhappy with his life and chasing success in all the wrong places and following other people's definition of success. Now, luckily, he had a wake-up call, and he was able to discover what really set him free and why he was put on this earth, and he developed something called the campfire effect. And the happily ever after is he gets to go out and share that with the world, and he gets to work with companies and amazing people like you. That story could be my story, it could be your story, it could be a customer success story. Don't be afraid, especially to talk about the suddenly part. The suddenly is where we have struggle and conflict. Why is it so important to share struggles in our story? Why is it so important to not be afraid to share times where we've struggled in our story? Struggles show growth. Struggles are the best way to connect with other people because how many of us struggle on a daily basis? I mean, I had to fend for myself for breakfast this morning without my wife. That was a struggle, right? We struggle every single day. Share stories of your struggle and you'll connect with people. If any of you have ever seen the movie The Tale of Despero, there's an amazing scene in that movie where Despero says, "Why are you going to save me? Have you saved any of the other mice?" And Gregory says, "No, never, not one." "Well, why me then? Why would you save me?" And Gregory said, "Because you, mouse, you can tell a story. And stories make light. And light is precious in a world so dark. So begin at the beginning. Tell Gregory a story and make some light." And because Despero so badly wanted to live, he began with Once Upon a Time. Understand why you're put on this earth. Focus on building your brand and go out and make light and share your story with the world. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.